is just so cool, so cool. Tia, who runs CAP, she and I are going to go talk at a conference in end of April, so beginning of May in Tauranga. We're going to talk about how do you combine helping people with proclaiming the gospel. It's going to be a fun little team event with us, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Hey, we're kicking off this new series, and today we're looking at you and me, and next week we're going to look at me and you, which tells you absolutely nothing about the series, so I hope you're excited. And it's going to be a great time. But hey, I want to start off by just getting us into the zone here a little bit, and I want to ask you a question. Do you remember your first kiss? Remember that first kiss? Some people are smiling and some people are looking down right now. So, it happened to me. I remember mine happened to me at the beginning of my junior year. It's year 12 here in New Zealand. Lisa Krum was her name. I still remember her name, Lisa Krum. We grew up together. I had known her since I was 8 years old, and we both waited for 8 years till we were 16 to proclaim that we like each other. Remember when you liked that first person? And so we liked each other. So it was the end of the prom. It was our first prom. We went to the prom, and walking up to the door, dimly lit little porch, perfect romantic little setting. I knew this was the night for that first kiss. What I didn't realize is that her parents' master bedroom was right next door to the front door, and her window was right there, the mother and father's window right next to that door. And so I remember getting up the nerves, and this is it, I got to do it, man up, man up. But because I believe in empowering women, instead of just going in for the kill, I said, may I kiss you goodnight? To which I hear her mother through the window go, oh, how cute. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm committed now anyway. Can I just say a little side note? The younger generation doesn't know how to kiss. I think it's all those zombie vampire movies. Younger generation just kind of comes in, and just come in. So she comes in for the kill on this kiss, and no one warned me about braces. And she was wearing braces. I walked away with a cut lip that night. Also, nobody warned me about the tongue. I didn't know people used tongue when they kissed. And so I walked away psychologically scarred that night as well. Had a few counseling sessions with my youth pastor. But at the end of all that, at the end, she backs away and she goes, good night, Brian. In which I replied, that first kiss. Remember that first kiss? Kissing's unpredictable, isn't it? Unpredictable, which makes it so amazing that the Apostle Paul uses this phrase of kissing as a major theme for how we are to be with one another, how we're to greet one another. He refers to kissing more than any exhortation on how we are to relate to each other. 4 different times he writes about this idea of kissing one another to the early church, the early Christians. And he says, here's what I want you to do. I want every one of you, when you greet each other, to do it with a holy kiss. It comes out of Romans 16, verse 16. Greet one another with a holy kiss. It's the first place we see it. And he's basically saying, look, I want you to kiss on each other, he's saying. You know, I want you to put your lips on somebody. So we're going to have a little practice. No, we're not. So, I don't even talk to people when they say, meet your neighbor. So I'm shocked that I have to talk about this. Talk about the definition of the awkward sermon. And so I'm feeling a little awkward here, but it's in the Bible. So we're all looking at how to relate. So we're going to go for this to say this. So let's figure out what in the world's going on here. Why this phrase? Why this phrase, kissing one another? Context is everything. When you study the Bible, context is everything. So let's get our head around that, and then we might get an idea where Paul's going with this. It's found in the book of Romans. Now, here's Romans. Romans is his theological masterpiece, all right? It is heavy. It is a heavy book. It's his pinnacle work. More has been written about the book of Romans than written about any other book in the Bible. It is heavy theological stuff. Who's he writing to? The title of the book would make you assume Romans. He's talking to Romans, and he is. But he's also going much wider than that. Paul intended his work to go out to every single Christ follower that could hear it. So he's writing to people in Jerusalem and in Thessalonica and in Ephesus, everybody. And he goes, I want you to understand a few things. I want you to understand who God is. I want you to understand what his plan is for all of us, what his nature is, and what the nature of life is, and how to relate to one another. So for 15 chapters, he lays down some of the most thorough, incredible theology that's ever been written. And then chapter 16, he makes a turn. There's this big turn. For 15 chapters, he lays straight up, hardcore theology, solid biblical thinking about the nature of God, about the nature of humanity, about what is this nature of sin, about how does law and freedom work together, how do the Jews fit in, how do the Gentiles fit in. It's perfect, it's deep, it's thoughtful, it's really hard to understand. You could study like chapter 9. You could study chapter 9 for a lifetime. There's so much in it. And then he gets to chapter 16, and his tone completely changes. And he goes from this deep, serious theological writer to this teenager with an Instagram account. And he just shifts all of a sudden. And he's like, mate, oh, hey, I forgot my coat at your house. Can you get it? Oh, hey, your mom's cooking. Rocks, man, your mom's cooking rocks. And he just changes his whole tone about this. And I think what he's doing is that, listen to what he's thinking as a theological thinker. He's thinking, now, by the way, I just want to sum up everything I've just written about in the last 15 chapters. I just want to sum it up. And I think the best way to sum it up is just do this. Just kiss each other every time you see them. What is that about? See, this is really, really important stuff. He's trying to get Jews and Gentiles and Greeks and slave owners and ex-slave owners and former slaves, and even more shocking, the most shocking, men and women together in one gathering, in one church to learn about God. This was big stuff. He's trying to get these very diverse people who are socially, economically, and racially have nothing to do with each other. He's trying to make them family. He's trying to get them to actually love each other. One commentary puts it this. They write, the fact that this diverse group of people loved one another is potent proof that God's love works. Look around. How diverse are we? Look around. See, chapter 16, with all the greetings and all the relationships and all these personal comments, I think it kind of adds to his work. It's proof that chapters 1 through 15 work. And if we follow the truth of this book we call the Bible, it builds us up. But it also builds us up relationally, together. And it's the proof of God's love. So here's our reality check. The reality check is great relationships, great ones, are difficult. They're really difficult, but they are absolutely essential. Absolutely essential. If you have a teenager, say amen to that twice. You know, I mean, it takes work, right? It takes work. Great relationships are difficult. Excuse me. And you know how things are. Sometimes when you face really, really difficult things, we say, okay, you know what? I just can't be bothered. This is too hard. I won't do it. It's just too much work. It's like dieting or exercise or being a blues fan. It's just too hard to keep doing. Relationships are difficult, but they're essential. So we have to work through this. The reality is we're all being judged, all of us. And we all get judged by one standard. It's not your fashion sense. It's not the car you drive. It's not how much money you make or how much you weigh or your address or your job. You're being judged, all of you. Sorry, you're being judged by how nice you are. We all get judged for that. In the end, that's what people care about. When you leave the room, people talk about you, and they talk about you when you leave the room. And that's what they're talking about, how nice you are or how nice you are not. Their experience with you relationally becomes their topic of conversation. And in the end, who you are is really who you are in relationship. Treat people well, and you're going to do well in life. Treat people poorly, even by accident, even unintentionally, even though you might be blinded to the fact that you are, even though your family of origin gave you some really bad habits. No matter what causes you to treat people poorly, in the end, our lives are defined by our behavior. This is very true of the early church. So here's Paul and all the early writers, all the New Testament writers. They poured it on with the early church on how to relate to one another. They called it alelios, which meant one another. That's where we get that phrase from, one another. And they were big, they were huge into this idea of one another. The early church followed one another commands. There's like 59 of them in the New Testament, which they all tried to follow. They realized that their credibility, Jesus' credibility, Jesus' reputation, their lives depended on whether or not they could actually be one another to one another. Wouldn't it be cool? I mean, wonderful if we at GCC could be like that with each other. Because if we did, the closer we got to each other as family, the closer you get to people, the better life feels and looks and gets. If you got closer to your spouse or to your kids or to your neighbors or to your cell group members, your life would be better. Who doesn't want that? I mean, there's actually studies out there that if you get closer to your boss, you will get a raise. You will. You'll get a raise. Get closer to your boss, you will get a raise. Who doesn't want that? By the way, you interested in a barbecue on Wednesday? Maybe just come on over and hang out a little bit. See, following these commands, we learn to get closer to each other. So what I just want to do is I want to ask us 3 you and me questions. 3 questions about you and me that I think will help us grow closer to each other. The first one is all about how you view things. Do you remember the name Lisa Reed? Remember Lisa Reed? She was a New Zealand celebrity. She was a girl where at 11, she had a brain tumor, and the brain tumor grew and kind of squashed her optical nerve, so she lost her sight. And in her depression, she kind of decided, I'm going to turn this into something positive. And she became a national celebrity from like 2000, I think. It was from the year 2000 on. And she became a spokesperson for people who lost their sight. Not only was she famous, her singing eye dog, Amy, was just as famous. You remember Lisa and Amy Reed? You remember that? So her dog, Amy, was just as famous as she was. And then as she got older, she met this wonderful, wonderful man, and she got engaged, literally sight unseen. She got engaged with this man. Well, then when she was 24 years old, she was reaching down to pet Amy, and she tripped. And she fell. She hit her head on a coffee table and then on the floor. And as a result of that, she regained her sight. Are you remembering this story now? And so it wasn't full sight. It was just in her left eye, partial sight. But she had sight now. And when they interviewed her, they said, what is it about getting your sight? What do you love so far? And she said, the first thing I'm really relieved and glad about was to discover that I'm actually engaged to quite a handsome man. That was the first thing she said. And then she said, but then I knew Amy was beautiful, but now I could never imagine how much more beautiful she is now that I can see. See, some of us are blind, and I don't think we know it. The discouragements of life, the hits that life dishes out to us, it gets us to a place where we lose our ability to see the good around us, the beauty around us. We self-limit by only focusing on negative stuff. I know I'm talking to Kiwis. They make friends by complaining together. And so we focus on the negative. Have you ever talked to somebody and the whole time you were talking, all you did was focus on that one long hair coming out of their nose? Too honest? You all do it. You know you do it. And we just focus on the one thing that bothers us instead of the whole person? It's easy to keep seeing the negative, but God doesn't do that. He doesn't look at us that way. He looks at us and goes, I did such good work with this group of people. This is some of my best work. These people are amazing. And I think we need to figure out how to do that ourselves. So here's the first question. What do you see in one another? What do you see when you look at the other person? This is what Paul wanted for his early Christians. Be devoted to one another in love, he writes. Honor one another above yourselves. Honor. What is honor? We use this word a lot in New Zealand, more than I remember using it in the States. Honor is the manifestation of awe. I'm in awe of this person. Honor is when you are in awe of something and it changes your behavior towards them. For instance, I'm in awe of Tyler Doozy, our worship guy. I'm in awe of the talent. This guy oozes talent. I'll tell you, watch this guy. He is going to be one of those people that's going to be known globally for the worship music he writes and produces and sends out. Watch him. And someday I'm going to be able to say, Tyler Doozy, he's my friend, man. He's been in my kitchen. He's used my bathroom. I'm going to be able to brag about knowing Tyler Doozy. I'm in awe of this guy. What if we all saw each other like that? In that kind of light? Dads, When you come home from work, what if you opened the door and went, yes, family, you're still here. I love you guys. Instead of knocking on the door and kicking the backpack, oh, who left the backpack here? Kids, pick up your stuff, which is usually the greeting that this dad usually offers. What if we change the way we do these things? Kids, why don't we get the kids to reverse it? What if the kids line the backpacks up like into an aisle and put a red carpet out? And then when the dad walked in, yes, here he is. He worked all day again, paying for all of our stuff. Let's give it up. He's working more. He's working more. I mean, what if we just changed the way we honored each other and appreciated each other? What would happen if we devoted ourselves to each other in this kind of love, to the point where we had honor and awe for the wonderful work God did in each and every one of us? What a better place. A better home, a better workplace, a better neighborhood, a better house we would be in. Romans 12:16 says, live in harmony with one another. Don't be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. This harmony word, that's what happens when two different sounds come together and make a better sound together. And whoever you think is beneath you, that whole phrase, whoever you think is lower than you, what if we honored and loved them? And then this word conceit, the whole idea behind this is conceit. Conceit is what divides people because they're not worthy of you. And you just don't kiss something that you think is ugly. That's what he says, get rid of that stuff. A holy kiss, Paul's saying, requires sight, empowered by grace. Grace. And here's the application, I think, for us. Who do you need to look at differently? Who in your life do you need to start looking at differently? Think of a specific person right now. Write it down. Write that person down. If it's your spouse, use real tiny letters. Little. If it's your teenager, big and bold, and make them see it by accident, all right? Just let them see it by accident. The same thing about kissing one another. You know, living in New Zealand, I've had to learn this, what it means to kiss people. The Polynesian influence here, the way people just kiss each other on every greeting, I had to get used to that. I had to learn to do that. I'm not from a kissy family. And so at first I did it because I'm like, okay, when in Rome. And I would go after that meeting or after that social thing, I would go home and I'm like, yuck, man, I'm going to get the flu. And this is terrible. I'm sanitizer on my face. I was like, this is wrong. But after some time here, I thought, this is great. And I'm like, who can I kiss next? And I'm looking around. And it's like, and I went on this crusade. So I finally decided, I just went back to the States in January, and I thought, I'm going to teach my family this. And I was all revved up. I was getting off the plane. I was going to a funeral. Well, some people thought that. It was a wedding. It was actually a wedding. My niece's ex-boyfriend thought it was a funeral. And so I went to this wedding. And my family was there and a bunch of friends. I thought, I'm going to get off the plane and I'm going to see them. I was on this crusade. I'm going to walk up. I'm going to give them all a kiss on the cheek and big hugs. I'm going to kiss these people. And I got off the plane. I walked with my daughters. And we walked right up to them. And as I come up to them, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to kiss you. And I didn't do it. It was just too weird. It was too weird. It is really hard to kiss people you know, that you've known for a long time. So I want us to get our head around how do we make that step. A lot of us here have known each other for a long time. We just start kissing each other, it's just going to be weird. So how do we move that way? And I think that leads to the next question. How do we need to open up to one another? All right, now real quick, I know there are some guys here, because I can see some frowning faces now, going, Brian, where are you going with this? This whole kiss one another, open up, all this feminine, rubbish, emotional, what are you doing? I'm a rugby guy, scratch, win, and where I want kind of guy. And so what are you doing with this? Can I just say, you know what? What a gift it would be if us guys were to open up more. Open up more. We actually let our kids hear us say, you know what? I was wrong. Sorry. I was wrong. That you're married, you let your wife know, you know what? I don't know the answer to that. Let's figure it out together. You know, just show a little bit of vulnerability. Just show a little bit of a willingness to not be the tough guy all the time. Sometimes you got to be the tough guy and stand up, be the tough guy. Absolutely. But sometimes we don't always have to be that. So here's Paul. He says, accept one another. Romans 15. Accept one another, then just as Christ accepted you in order to bring praise to God. Why do we accept people? Not because they deserve it. Most people don't. It's because we didn't deserve it either. And that's why we accept others. When we get that, it changes everything about how we look at people. The risk of a relationship is no longer a risk because God's got our back. He's saying, look, I've already accepted you. I've already given you all you need to have. I've already showed you what a phenomenal person you are. I already love all over you. You can now go love on people. I've got your back. But it goes beyond that. It goes, don't just accept him, go further than that. In James 5, the writer writes, therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. Who knows your struggles? Who knows your sins? Who do you talk to in that sense? Not everybody. You don't need to know. Everybody doesn't need to know, but some do. See, the problem is we live in a society that has taught us not to talk. We don't talk about things that matter. We are so media saturated. We'll talk about Brad and Angela Jolie, and we'll talk about Justin Bieber getting arrested in Argentina or whatever. But we don't talk about anything that matters. We have forgotten how to have really great conversations. And we've lost the art of sharing with one another. Think about how dating works in New Zealand. I think about dating. Let me show the slide up here, next slide. Don't raise your hand, but who's single? I don't want to raise your hand, because when you ask people in the room who's single, you got some people go, yeah, I'm single. You got other people going, yep, I'm single, 027-248, and they start advertising. So I don't want to, let's keep it down a little bit. But for the single folk, listen to this. Married folk, pay attention, because you're the ones that are going to walk beside the single folk on this stuff. In every relationship is an X or a Y. Everyone, whether it's romantic or it's just friend-based or it's colleague-based. X is him and her, they come, and when it comes to the point of making a commitment, you go, nah, that ain't going to happen, and you just keep on going. Or you meet each other and you come to a point of commitment and go, yeah, no, I'm going to do life together. And then you start this path together. Every relationship's like that. These relationships are based on this thing called attraction. Attraction is what draws you together. Attraction is not a bad thing. Attraction is actually what gives you the courage to walk across the room and say, hi. Right? So whether you are just attracted enough to bite the bullet and say something stupid to say hi, or attracted enough to that leader, to that job, to that boss, to that friend, enough to make an effort to say, hey, mate, I'm Brian. That's what starts it. But relationships are not based on attraction. That just gets it started. And anybody here who's been married more than so many years, you look at each other, I love you, but the attraction level, but I love you. And so we know how it works, right? We know how it works. But what needs to happen is during that time of relationship, we need to get into the zone of getting to know each other. And it's the history sharing zone where we need to learn to talk, where we learn about each other's values and drives and what they like and not like and what movies and music. And then it gets down to what gets you up in the morning and what do you want to be for life and how do we want to do life together. And you start working through all the stuff and you find out all the great things about them and you find out all the bad things about them. And that leads you to this thing called objectivity. And it's at the point of objectivity that we can make some decisions about stuff. Objectivity is I know enough about you, good and bad, to know whether I want to make that commitment to you or not. So people who know me and know me well, they know at one hand, man, Brian can really make me laugh. And the other hand, he just doesn't shut up. And he says inappropriate things often. And so that's good and bad. And they go, oh, it's all right, I can deal with that. And they're still my friend. So that's where we're at. The problem, though, is that we do dating and getting to know you stuff by seeing movies and texting, and we don't really talk. And so a lot of people get married, but objectivity doesn't come till a few years later. There's another line down below, and it happens after the marriage. And you're like, oh, I didn't know that about them. And because we rushed through it and never dealt with the hard work of getting to know each other, we've lost the art of conversation. But what's even worse is in our Western world, our social culture in New Zealand, Australia, America, wherever, is that somewhere up above, before objectivity, before that commitment, many people enter into this intimacy level, a sexual intimacy. And you start and you break into it before you got that objective thing. Now, if you have that kind of an intimate connection with someone before you actually know everything about them, how hard is it to be objective? Very hard. Almost impossible. And so the stuff that we read in the Bible about sex after marriage, it's not just a bunch of rules because God says that would be fun, so no, you can't have that. That's not what he does. It is, look, we need to put each other first. So this is how we put each other first. Let's do the hard work of history sharing, become objective, make that commitment to one another, and now let me show you what real relationships like. And you move into a new level of intimacy. But to do the history sharing, whether it's for friendships or romantic relationships, it's hard because holy kissing requires vulnerability and some risk to be honest with one another. So let's get real practical here. Ladies, you want to get a guy to talk? You want to get a guy to really talk? You've got to get our attention first, all right? I'm going to talk in generalities here, but you've got to get our attention first. If you're trying to talk with us and we seem aloof or uninterested or we're ignoring you or it looks like you're not a priority, it's not you. You have to get our attention because we don't know you're there. We don't, even if you're in the same room, we don't know you're there yet. Conversation happens in this one tiny little bit of our brain right up here in this low part. And what it means is we're really good at focusing. Guys are really good at focusing, but we focus on one thing only. It's all we can do. We're a one-trick pony. We really are. And so you start talking. For instance, some of the ladies on staff here will come to my office and they'll start coming in and they heard something. They got to get my opinion on something. So they'll start talking and I'm kind of doing something and I'm just start hearing this blah, 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 blah. So Brian, what do you think? I'm like, oh, I didn't even hear the door open. I'm thinking hungry sandwich. And so I'm like, oh, wait, what was that? See, ladies, whether it is a friendship thing, a coworker thing, or a relationship thing, you got to get our attention. You got to literally touch us on the arm, grab our face, give us a piece of pie, something to get our attention. And then we'll enter into dialogue and conversation. We'll get there. And once we're engaged, we're really focused on that conversation. But just don't dump a bunch of things on us either, because we're so focused. What we do is we problem solve. And the last thing you want is to dump the stuff on us, and then we sit there and we start giving you a lecture. Okay, what you got to do is A, B, C. You taking notes? C, D. That's the last thing you want. Because what we're trying to do is be a team here, right? We're trying to relate to one another. Women, what you need to do for us is you need to inspire us, right? Inspire us. Put your question in the form of support. All right, support. Say something positive or encouraging, because we're very simple creatures. And say, you know what, you are rocking as a dad. You're doing so good in your job. Can we talk about a few things? And what you'll do is you'll see us relax and stop being so insecure and enter into a really good conversation. All right? But guys, we're just the opposite. We're just the opposite. We need to realize that women, they do not need our help. All right, they do not need our help. They own more words than us. They think things through in a more complex way than us. They are way ahead of us on this stuff. They don't need our help. What we need to do, guys, is we need to identify first what's going on. Put your question in the form of a question. All right? We're real simple guys, really. Just ask the question. Here's the application point here. When can you make time to talk? We're a busy city. We do things by texting. We text on the car even though it's illegal because we don't make time to talk. Make a schedule. Give some time to each other. Cell groups, don't just do the Bible study. Talk with each other. All right? And don't just talk on Wednesday night or whenever you meet. Meet each other other times as well and be with one another on that stuff. Final question for you and me. We'll finish it up here. The last question for us, I think, is what are we willing to give to one another? What are we willing to give to one another? See, the genius of the New Testament writers is that they wrote from this foundation of what God has already given us. See, by establishing what God has given us, we can be people who give to each other. We can become freer to love. Paul writes in Romans 8, the spirit you received does not make you slaves so that you live in fear again. Rather, the spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship. And by him we cry, Abba, Daddy, Daddy, Father. See, You received God himself when you gave your life to Christ. So you can be free, no fear. Galatians 4 writes, but when the time had finally come, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive, there's that word again, adoption to sonship. See, a holy kiss to one another requires sacrifice. Sacrifice. I always wondered why in these passages he didn't just write, so God made us family, so that you would be his son. And why did he use the word adoption? Why was that? I never really understood why adoption, because it's family, but not really. What does that mean? That's how I was reading it? Until my sister adopted a little girl, Zoe, my niece from China. And in watching them go through that 2-year process of adopting this little girl, Zoe, from China, when the stuff they went through, the legal paperwork, the expense, the meetings with judges and international authorities, the meeting with authorities in China, the expense again, the legal vetting, the counseling them and all their kids had to go through before they welcomed someone else into their family, the expense, it was a massive ordeal, massive ordeal. It's almost as if God uses this word adopt because he values us so much that he wants to legally define us as his heirs, but legally, publicly define us as his heirs. He wants there to be a public proclamation that you belong to him, that everything he owns is yours, that it was my intention to go to this length to love you and to gather you and to make you my family. It was my intention to go through this cost and this process and persistence in pursuing you to make you my family because I love you that much. And we can only love each other and we can only love others around us when we are thoroughly convinced of God's love for us. That's step one. I think God says, do you get it? Do you get it? Do you know how much I am truly committed to you? Do you get it? Do you know how much I have given for you? Do you get it? Do you know that I collect every tear you cry? Do you know that I sent my son without hesitation so you would know my love? So don't hesitate in showing that love to others. Don't hold back, whether they deserve it or not, to love one another. I think our application here is, do you get it? Do you get how much he loves you? Some of us in this room have known this for a long time, and I think maybe we have forgotten. Others of us in this room, I think, are figuring it out. They're starting to accept it. And today's your moment to say, I get it. I get it. God has gone to immense expense to adopt you as his son and as his daughter. Jesus, Easter, what we've just been celebrating, is proof that since eternity, God chose you. You. He went to huge lengths to show you his love. He adopts you. He chooses you. Do you get it? Do you know how much he loves you? Because I think if we get a glimpse of that, just a glimpse, we start one anothering each other around us a little bit better. So we're going to take some time to be reminded of that. We're going to sing a song that just reminds us of how much he loves us. And what I'm going to ask is that as we sing it like a prayer, sing it like a reality check to yourself, and then we're going to take some time to remember his love around the communion table after that.